Do take a seat. So we are starting our new series this evening called The Christian Mind. The aim during this series, as Miles has said, is to help us think biblically, to think Christianly about every part of life in our complicated and confusing world. So we're going to be thinking over topics like politics, work, technology, the media, self-image, all those kinds of things, and how we think biblically about them. Even within this room, if I asked you your thoughts on a TV program, we would probably have 200 different opinions, 200 different thoughts on what we think about Facebook or what we think about work or how we choose our cars. And that's right in some ways because we all come from different backgrounds with different experiences, so we form our thoughts and our opinions in different ways. But as we go through this series, hopefully we'll see that the Bible has truth to offer. Hopefully we know that already. But we'll see the Bible has truth to offer, and actually the Bible has truth to offer to every part of life. And if it's the source of our truth, then it should be able to speak into all those parts of life, shouldn't it? So we're going to do some thinking about our thinking. We're going to stretch our brains. And thinking about our thinking is good because how we think affects our actions. So hopefully, as a result of thinking about our thinking, we will act differently. I'm going to stop saying thinking now because you're probably as confused as me. Let me pray as we start, and then let's get stuck in. Lord, thank you that you give us minds to think. We thank you that you are a thinking God. Thank you, as we've sung, for your wisdom and your knowledge. Help us this evening to think. Help us to think biblically. Give us the mind of Christ. Amen. So our thinking is all about the glasses that we wear. I put a pair of sunglasses on briefly. It's all about the glasses we wear. Our thinking starts from our worldview, the way that we see the world. It's the perspective that we see reality. And it's made up of assumptions that form the basis of everything we believe. These assumptions or presuppositions, they're the lenses that we see the whole world through, hence the glasses. The lenses that I look through now are slightly darkened. So anything I look at is slightly darkened. If you're wearing some slightly better quality glasses than these, then you'll be able to see things clearer than I could with these glasses on. If you were wearing glasses with blue lenses, everything would look blue. That is our worldview, the start of our thinking. And basic and built into our thinking means that every time we do anything, we're acting on those worldviews. You're acting on those presuppositions, those assumptions you have about the world. Everything you do is based on those. But you don't probably think about those in a deep philosophical way every time you do something. So every time you get up or go to a birthday party or drive your car, you probably don't think back to what your worldview is and how that influences your thought. But the way that you view the world will have had a say on what car you've bought, what clothes you've chosen to wear, whether you've gone to a birthday party or not, whether you choose to go to work and what job you do. But you probably won't think about them. You may not even know what they are. As somebody once said, if you wanted to know what it was like to be soaked with water, you wouldn't ask a fish. Because they're so used to being in water, they don't know any different. And it's the same with our worldviews, our presuppositions. They're so deeply ingrained in us that often we don't even know what they are. But we're going to challenge ourselves during this series and do some thinking about how we think, what's in the back of our minds. And I think if you think about the way that our culture thinks today, then you may have seen a shift in the dominant way of thinking, the dominant worldview. If I said postmodernism to us, you might have some idea of what that means, the fact that there is no such thing as truth. The dominant presupposition for most people in our culture these days is that truth is subjective, that we come to truth ourselves. And that's a shift. It hasn't always been like that. You can track the history of thought and how people have thought and what the dominant worldview has been. And in different cultures, there are different dominant worldviews. But we're going to touch a bit more on postmodernism this evening because I think that is one of the dominant things that our culture is facing. And actually, the danger is that that seeps into us as Christians. If we don't think about our thinking, then the culture will do the thinking for us, won't it? So we're going to do some of that. We're going to do some thinking about our thinking and what our glasses might be. Because how we think influences how we act. I've already said that. What we think is true or not true, how you perceive what is real, influences what you do about that reality. So, for example, if you saw a man walking down the street and then you saw a man stood on his garden wall and he was shouting, "Jane! Jane, where are you? Jane, when I find you, I'm going to put you back in your cage." If you saw that man, what you think about him doing that influences how you act. You might think, that man stood on his garden wall is an absolute nutcase. He's wearing his dressing gown and he's shouting to somebody called Jane and he's going to put her back in her box. He's a nutter and he needs the police. That would be the right thing to do, wouldn't it? This man's crazy, I need to ring the police. If you like to act a bit eccentrically, you might think this man is a fellow eccentric like me. I'm just going to let him carry on. I hope he finds Jane. You might think like that. What you think about him affects how you act. However, if you'd been there 2 minutes earlier and you'd seen the postman walk up to his door, knock on his door with a big parcel, and this man in his dressing gown opened the door and his cat sprinted out towards the road, you'd have known why he was stood in his dressing gown shouting for Jane and why he wanted to put her back in the box. And then you might have helped him try and find his cat. So can you see the way that you think about reality affects how you act? And that process impacts our moral lives as well. Because what we see is true about human beings, ourselves and other people, affects how we think they should be treated. If you believe that humans are just molecules mashed together, then it's not going to really matter how we treat them. If you think that we're just a biological system, then to fix a problem, we're going to need medicine. We're going to need to fix a chemical imbalance. Or we're going to need some kind of physical treatment. But as Christians, we know that we are more than just molecules mashed together. We know that we're more than just a biological system. So with that in mind, knowing that we're spiritual as well as physical, we know that the Bible should speak into every part of life. And we need to trust it to feed our thinking on our whole lives. And that means that we can't, as Christians, compartmentalize our faith into just a little spiritual box. Just our Sunday mornings or our Sunday evenings, if you're here tonight. Just your small group time and maybe a prayer meeting. Maybe just your quiet time when you get your Bible open on your own, if that happens for you. We can't just let the Bible feed that bit of our life. If we're spiritual beings and the Bible is a source of truth for us, then it should affect our whole thinking. But we need then a framework of how to think. So that's the plan of our first session in this series this evening, is to put together a biblical framework for us from Romans to help give us a grid to think biblically about the whole of life. Now that's not a small task, so bear with me. Let's get into Romans, and firstly we're going to look at Romans 1. So if you've got a Bible, I ask you to open it to Romans 1. And I'm going to read a couple of verses. I'm going to read verse 18 to verse 20 to start us off. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For, since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. So here, in just a couple of verses, I think we've got some categories for the whole of the world. Did you see in verse 20? For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen. So there we have God Firstly, in creation. So God has created. That puts God as creator. That's an important first category. His eternal power. He is eternal. He has always been. And he is his divine nature. He is the God. We have categories for God. And we have categories for man there as a result of that. We have man being created. And we have man in Eden being in relationship with God, don't we? And at that point, in that relationship, God and humans were together in perfect relationship. And so their thinking is spot on. They've got God in his right place. And they are connected to him in relationship. So their thinking flowed from who he was. He had created them, and they knew that. And so God gave Adam tasks. He gave him the animals to name, and Adam thought in relation to who God was and the task he'd given him, and he named some animals. So the way Adam thought about God affected his actions. But we know, don't we, if you've been around the Bible for any length of time, that that's not how it stayed. That all went wrong. And what happened, as we see in Romans 1, is that Adam and Eve exchanged the truth of God for a lie. Romans 1:21. Although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. And I think that's probably a commentary, firstly on Romans, on the Garden of Eden, but also on the rest of human life since then. We flipped that God and us in perfect relationship. Do you see that? To us being the main big thing. We're the center of the universe. And God then becomes something that we have created. The truth is suppressed. Verse 22. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like a human being. We've exchanged the glory of God for our own glory. Even worse, we've exchanged it for things that look like God. So we become the place that we think truth flows from. That's what happened to Adam and Eve. They decided they were making the truth. They were becoming God. We become the place of all knowledge. We're the ones worth worshipping. We're the ones with all the great power. Truth is what we say it is. Do you see the postmodernism there? We can define our own truth. We exchange the truth of God for a lie about the truth of ourselves. And the lie for us at the moment, I think, is that actually as humans we create our own meaning. It doesn't take you long online to find people creating their own meaning or quoting pithy statements about quoting their own meaning. Listen to some of these. Write your own definition of success and then live it. Sounds great, doesn't it? The most successful people in life recognize that they create their own love, manufacture their own meaning, generate their own motivation. Sounds good, doesn't it? The meaning of life is to create meaning to your life. Doesn't really make sense, does it? But if you overlaid that on Facebook over to a picture of some nice mountains and posted it, you'd get thousands of likes straight away. No problem, because it sounds great. And people want to sign up to that. I want to create my own meaning. I want to be who I want to be. But they're a lie, aren't they? And we can see, as we say it so clearly, that they don't work. But so many of us are living by them. Who we are is defined by who we want to be. What is true is what I feel is true. Or what I observe to be true. Or what I want to be true. And as a result, I then act on that. Listen to this from a respected Christian leader in the States recently. This was on her Instagram with a nice photo. She said, the good news is here. You're allowed to think and feel whatever you need or want to feel. Come close, because I need to explain this part well. I don't know quite how you do that over the internet, but bear with her. It has been my job for so long as a leader in this community to care deeply about what you think and feel about me and the way I live my life. I've cared so much for so long, and it's been a great honor. Now we're entering a new time, which calls for a different type of leadership. It is now my job as a leader not to concern myself too deeply about what you think and feel about me, about the way I live my life. That is what I want to model now, because that is what I want for you. I want you to grow so comfortable in your own being, your own skin, that you become more interested in your own joy and freedom and integrity than in what others think about you. I want you to refuse to betray yourself, not just for you, for all of us. Because what the world needs, now you know it's going to be good after that, what the world needs in order to grow, in order to relax, in order to find peace, in order to become brave, is to watch one woman at a time live her truth without asking permission or offering explanation. The most revolutionary thing a woman can do is not explain herself. Now, did you catch what she was saying? Don't hear me attacking women here, that's just the example. But women, it's your truth that matters. You make your own truth. You don't even need to explain it to anybody. And it doesn't even need to make sense. But if it's true for you, that's what you need to live by. Now, there are truths wound up in what she said. Don't get me wrong. There are some good things in what she said. But it's suppressed truth, isn't it? Deep down, she's talking there about the exact lie that we see in Romans 1. We have flipped ourselves into the place of truth creation. We are the ones who say what is true and right about the world, and we are therefore the ones that say what is true and right about me. And I think this kind of thinking is working itself out in all of society. We can't stand authority, can we, these days? Because we're the ones with importance. We're always right. So somebody with a uniform or some rules, they can't be right. And politics gets itself in a mess. I'm not going to go there. That's Baroness Cox's job. But because we've all got our own system of right and wrong, because we all create our own truth, actually, we can't really stand up for anything that's true. So we go with what people want to hear. Another example, relationships and sex have been corroded in our culture and destroyed because it's okay to do whatever feels best. Whatever is true for you is right to do. And the hard thing here, as we've said about that quote from that lady, is that there is truth packed up in these things somewhere. There are good things in these things. People say good things, but for the wrong reasons. It's not totally empty of truth. It's like the truth has been taken, like a ball in a swimming pool, and suppressed down and pushed down out of the way and mashed into something that's hidden. There are half-truths buried in these false systems. And even bad things, really bad things in our culture, have truth suppressed into them. So take pornography. There is truth suppressed in pornography. One of the basic assumptions of pornography is that people are attractive to each other and sex is a good thing. But that truth is so mashed up and misshaped and suppressed that it's corrupting people and it's destroying lives. Gambling is the same thing. One of the basic assumptions of gambling is that money is a good thing and we should desire it and we should use it well. But it's so distorted and suppressed that it destroys lives. Bad things have truths deep down in them, but we have exchanged the glory of God for a lie, and the lie is that we are the truth. We are the truth creators. And there's a big problem built into this for us as Christians, I think, because we can't stand on and look at the world and give them this charge that they are suppressing the truth and exchanging the glory of God for a lie without putting ourselves in that us category too. We are no different. We have suppressed the truth about God. And I think what we probably do is take the views of the Western culture and cover them with a Christian gloss that makes us feel like we've thought about them Christianly. Now, this is where we need to be wary. Remember, our presuppositions are the glasses we're wearing without even realizing we're wearing them, okay? Let me illustrate some of this to try and help land that. Take our homes. I wonder what we would say God wants from us for our houses or our flats or where you live. It might be something like this. He wants me to have a nice roof over my head. He wants me to have a secure rental position, or maybe even a good mortgage so I don't need to worry about it and my life is stable. He wants me to have a nice house that is well decorated and that is tidy when people come round so that the gospel looks good and that I can be hospitable to people. What about your job? What does God want from your working life? Maybe he wants you to study hard so you can get a well-paid job and you can give money to the church and you can be stable enough in life to support your family and a missionary in Africa and to all some good things that are going on. Maybe you're giving. Maybe you hear a great sermon on Philippians and you think about how we must give all to Christ. And then at the end you sing, I surrender all. And then you go home and make sure that you're giving 10%. And church is easy, isn't it? Because we think Christianly about church because we come on a Sunday and I've got a small group that I make once a month if I can, maybe twice a month. And I love praying with my friends there. And I'd love to see people more during the week and actually share life with them, but that's not really practical in my diary, so I make it on a Sunday. I wonder, do we really think like Christians in these things? Or are we just taking our comfort and putting a Christian gloss around it? And that might upset and offend you, and you could be forgiven for that because actually it might be close to the bone of our thinking problem, I think, that we're not taking the things of life and really thinking about them biblically. Because we've got our thinking upside down, our natural nature, even as Christians still, is to think in this way, to put us in the center. So we need a solution. And the solution comes in Romans 12. So if you've got a Bible, open Romans 12 up. And let me read some of it to remind you. In fact, we're going to go to Romans 11, verse 33 to start with. Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out. Or who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has been his counselor? Who has ever given to God that God should repay them? For from him and through him and for him are all things. To him be the glory forever. Amen. You see what that does there to the Romans 1 thinking? It transforms our thinking by putting God back in his right place. The place he was in Eden. The wisdom and knowledge of God. We cannot trace out his paths because they are too huge for us. We cannot understand his mind because it is too big. We put God back in his place of creator. Back in the place he should be. For from him are all things. All things come from him. He is creator of everything. All things are sustained through him. Everything continues. The reason we sit here and breathe now is because God sustains us. And all things are for him. All things are for him and his glory. The reason we have eyes, nose, and a mouth is to adore him and reflect his glory back to him. It's all for him. And so if we needed a starting point for our thinking, it's that. It's him, it's God. It's the wisdom and knowledge of God. It's his perfect, eternal existence in three persons, in community. Self-sufficient, all-sufficient, not needing anything. Notice we're not even in the picture yet. The start of knowledge, the true start of knowledge, is God. The true start of our thinking needs to be God. And this isn't a God that fits into our boxes, that makes us feel warm and fuzzy inside, and that answers our questions in the way we want them answered. This is a God that we can never truly understand. He's the source of all things and in control of all things. And the reality of sorting our thinking out and putting God in his rightful place is that it puts us back in our rightful place, doesn't it? Below him. Created. And actually, now, do you notice the difference between this and the original picture, the Eden thinking? There's a separation between us and God now. Because in our thinking, we are flawed. In our lives, we are flawed. Because we have exchanged the glory of God for a lie, we don't deserve to know him or be with him or in his presence. And that flows from who he is. So we're separated from him. But we know that he loves us and wants to connect with us. So how does he connect with us? Look down at Romans 12. Notice this comes, Romans 12, let me state the obvious here, comes after Romans 11 and after Romans 10 and 9 and 8 and all of the other books of Romans. And in Romans, Paul gives us a detailed outline of how we are saved, how salvation works. And then at Romans 12, verse 1, he says, therefore, because of all of that, because of who God is, because of how salvation works, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy. That is how we are connected back to God. That is how our thinking connects back to the source of all creation. In view of God's mercy. His work of redemption is the only way that we can know God. His work of redemption enables us to see God. His revealing himself to us is only possible because of his mercy to us. He couldn't show us himself in the Bible and in Jesus if he didn't have a plan for redemption to bring us back into relationship with him. He knew that he would do the work of saving people and bringing them back into relationship with him, so he could therefore reveal himself. So now, how we think about everything in our lives, every single part of our lives, is dictated by who God is through his work in Jesus. You start to see a pattern for our thinking. God's nature and his character revealed to us and connected to us through Christ. That's how we think. This is the grid. This is the right order to explain all of humanity. We can only make sense of ourselves as people if we think in this order, putting God first. So what does it look like, according to Paul then, the author of Romans, to think in this order? He says in verse 2, do not conform to the pattern of this world. So don't do that Romans 1 thinking. But be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Notice there, renewing is present tense. It's ongoing. So, in salvation, when we are saved by Jesus, our legal standing before God changes immediately. I think the New Testament has a pattern for our minds that means we are to seek our minds to be renewed continually. Over and over again in the New Testament, it tells us to seek out knowledge, to be transformed, to work out our salvation. Our legal standing before God is changed, but we need to do some thinking. And as a result of our thinking, we should be transformed people. Our lives should change. The renewing of our minds transforms our lives, what it looks like. And what does that actually look like in real life? How does that actually work? Go back a verse. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. So if we're going to think in this order, how we then act as a result should involve personal sacrifice. This is what Jesus did, didn't he? Jesus offered his body as a living sacrifice because he had a perfect thought pattern, if I can say that reverently. He knew who God was. He was God. He knew God's salvation plan. And so he knew who he was as a result of that. So if the end game of our thinking isn't our personal sacrifice, then we might have our thinking wrong somewhere along the way. And where does our thinking get to eventually? What's the end goal? It's this, new creation. Back to how it was in Eden. That's how it's going to be. We can know that in the future, we will know of the cross, we will know of Christ's work, but we will be back in the presence of God because of his work. But until then, we've got to work hard at our thinking through a grid something like this from Romans to help us to understand all of life as Christ sees it. So I wonder if we can work through a couple of quick examples. Maybe go back to our homes. How does that work out in this order? Well, we've got to start off by thinking, who is God? Who is God? God is three in one. Father, Son, and Spirit, in perfect relationship, in community. How is our thinking wrong? We want to be selfish. We want to make our houses perfect and our safe place and our comfortable place. Jesus gave up his comfortable place to sacrifice for us, to bring us back into relationship with God and with each other. So that doesn't mean we need to become traveling preachers like Jesus and die on a cross. But I think it does say something about our Western expectation of comfort, about our drive to have as low a mortgage as possible and an ideal home. If we're going to think like Jesus, then I think we need to be thinking about using our homes to build relationship with people, to build community with others, for supporting those in need. So I wonder, what would it look like for you to be really sacrificial with where you live? What would that look like for you? I wonder, would you be willing to let somebody stay in your home that you didn't know? Would you let maybe the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children that are coming to this country now from Syria, would you be able to put them up in your home? If your immediate answer to that is no, why is it no? And if it's because it will put you out in any way, then I wonder if that self-sacrifice thing isn't there. Now, that won't be the perfect example, because there'll be other reasons why that may not work for you. But you get the idea. What about our giving? Who is God? God is creator who gave himself for us. Everything we have now is through him and for him. So I wonder, is your giving sacrificial? Does the amount of money that you give cause you to sacrifice for the rest of the month? Because if your giving's comfortable, then you're not thinking through this order. What about church? Again, ask who God is. He is eternally existent, and his plan is to create a people to give him glory. And through Christ, we are that people. Through his redemption plan, we become that people. So church, for us, isn't a place we come to or a program we follow. It is our identity, it's who we are. We're a people on mission, sharing Jesus and sharing life together. So if we're really going to live that out, that has some implications on the ways that we set up church, doesn't it? On the ways that we view our attendance to a building or our attendance to a small group or what we do the rest of our time. Our lives should involve self-sacrifice. I don't think we are promised a comfortable life. So let's challenge our minds. Let's get uncomfortable. And let's try and let our thinking be renewed by Christ. Let's put God in his right place. Let's stop suppressing the truth. See who he is. See what he's done for you in Christ. See the amazing work of grace in Jesus. Renew your thinking. Think in that order. And then let your life be transformed. Because that's the outcome. Our lives look totally different. We should look totally different. It's going to be hard work. That is hard because it challenges those basic presuppositions that our lives are based on. But if we truly want to surrender all and give all to Christ, and we want to include our minds in that, then we need to do that hard work of thinking. Because otherwise culture will do the thinking for us. So hopefully you see that framework there. Gives us a grid of thinking, a way of processing things biblically. Hopefully you can take that now and apply different areas of your life to that grid. That's what we're going to do during this series over the next few months. We're going to take those different topics that I mentioned and we're going to apply this grid to them. Some of the services will look slightly different, so there'll be a chance for question and answers, chance to engage with the speaker and a panel and discuss those things and really chew them over together. It's a chance for us as a church to really work out how we think biblically about some of these confusing areas of life. So do come along, do engage with them. But today, as we take this framework away, can we do so with a worshipful heart? Can we see God for who he really is? We're going to come to the communion table in a minute. Can we see Christ and his work for what it really is in our lives? Can we put that in its right place? That verse again, for from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be the glory forever. Amen. Let me pray. God, we thank you for who you are, and we want to worship you for who you are. Your perfect, eternal nature. And we thank you so much that you left the comfort of heaven to live on this earth, to be a servant, and to die a servant's death for us. And we thank you that that gives us our identity, that we find ourselves, we find who we are in this way of thinking. And so we praise you for your great mercy to us. We praise you for who you are, and help us to think in this way and to be transformed with self-sacrificial lives for your glory. Amen.